Josephus and Jesus. What actually holds up? When people say Josephus is a forgery, they're usually repeating a slogan, not a conclusion. Josephus is one of the most important Jewish historians of the first century, and virtually every serious historian uses him. The question isn't whether Josephus is reliable in general, it's how to handle two specific passages about Jesus. Who Josephus was, why he matters. Josephus was born around 37 to 38 AD and died around 97 AD. He came from a priestly family, became a Pharisee at 19, and lived through the Jewish-Roman War. He served as military governor of Galilee, was captured by the Romans, and later became the court historian under Emperor Vespasian and Titus. He personally witnessed the siege of Jerusalem, the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, the fall of Masada in 73 AD. That puts him squarely inside the world of the New Testament. He's not writing centuries later, he's a contemporary. The two passages and how scholars actually assess them. 1. The James passage, strongest and least disputed. In Antiquities Book 20, Josephus refers to, open quote, James, the brother of Jesus, who was called Christ. Close quote. This passage is widely regarded as authentic. It's brief, neutral, and makes no Christian claims. Josephus isn't praising Jesus, he's simply identifying James. Ironically, that's what makes it strong. Historically, this tells us Jesus existed. He was known well enough to identify James by reference to him. Some people regarded Jesus as the Messiah. This passage alone already defeats the idea that Jesus is a myth. 2. The Testimonium Flavianum, real core, debated wording. The longer passage in Antiquities Book 18 is the famous Testimonium Flavianum. This is where the debate happens. Josephus describes Jesus as a wise man, a teacher, a worker of surprising deeds, someone who gained Jewish and Gentile followers, executed by Pilate via crucifixion. So far, there's no problem. Where scholars pause is when the passage says things like, he was the Christ, he appeared to them alive on the third day. That kind of language sounds more Christian than Jewish, and Josephus was a Pharisee, not a Christian. So scholars reasonably suspect later Christian interpolation. Here's the key point critics often miss. Open quote, interpolation does not mean fabrication. Close quote, it means later edits were added to an existing historical core. What scholars actually think, not internet talking points. A major survey led by Dr. Louis Feldman, the world's leading Josephus scholar, examined 52 top scholars. 4 said the passage is completely genuine. 6 said mostly genuine. 20 said genuine, with some interpolation. 9 said genuine with several interpolations. 13 said fully interpolated. That means the majority agree Josephus referred to Jesus, even if they disagree about how much later editing occurred. Even scholars who reject the passage entirely still usually accept Jesus as a historical figure. What Josephus still gives us, even with critical caution. Using cautious historical standards, summarized well by Dr. Gary Habermas, Josephus supports the following points. Jesus was known as wise and virtuous. He attracted followers among Jews and Gentiles. He was condemned by Pontius Pilate. He was executed by crucifixion. His followers claimed he rose from the dead. They continued spreading his teachings afterward. Jesus had a brother named James. Jesus was called Christ by some. None of this requires assuming Josephus was secretly Christian. It fits exactly what we'd expect from a Jewish historian reporting on a controversial figure. A fair critique of the forgery claim. The claim Josephus is a forgery overshoots the evidence. A full forgery would require inventing Jesus entirely, fooling Roman, Jewish, and Christian readers, surviving multiple manuscript traditions, and escaping detection by generations of hostile critics. That's not how ancient forgery works. A partially edited text? That's normal in antiquity. And that's what the evidence actually supports. Bottom line, clean and honest, Josephus is a first-century Jewish historian. He makes 2 references to Jesus. One is almost universally accepted. The other is debated, but has a strong historical core. Together, they independently confirm the basic gospel outline. Josephus doesn't prove Christianity is true, but he does prove Jesus was real, known, executed, and influential. And once that's granted, the conversation changes. Pliny the Younger, Roman government official, age 61-112. Pliny the Younger never met Jesus. Neither did Plutarch, who wrote about Alexander the Great. Polybius, our main source for the Punic Wars, wasn't there either. Yet no one dismisses their work. That is how credible history works. So the claim that Jesus must be fictional because a writer didn't meet him personally is not how history is done. The claim, Jesus isn't mentioned outside the Bible. This argument collapses immediately. The Old Testament is filled with prophecies about a coming Messiah, the Christ. First-century Jews, including Paul, were actively waiting for him. Paul believed Jesus was that Messiah. So the real question is not whether Jesus existed, but why do Roman historians call him the Christ? Why is Pontius Pilate known to us almost entirely because of Jesus? Who was Pliny the Younger? Pliny the Younger was not a theologian. He was a Roman author, lawyer, and government official. Governor of Bithynia, Pontus, Asia Minor, northern Galatia, adopted son of Pliny the Elder, the famous natural historian, writing officially to Emperor Trajan around AD 112. His letter 10.96 to 97 discusses how he was supposed to deal with Christians. This is government correspondence, not religious propaganda. What Pliny reports about Christians? Pliny explains what Christians actually did. Open quote, "They met on a fixed day before dawn, sang hymns to Christ as to a god, and bound themselves by a solemn oath, not to commit crimes, but to avoid fraud, theft, adultery, lying, and betrayal of trust. They then separated and later reassembled to share ordinary and harmless food." Close quote. He also notes that Christianity included all social classes, all ages, both men and women, city and countryside alike. What we learn from Pliny. From this single Roman letter, we learn the following facts. 1. Jesus Christ was worshipped as God by early Christians. 2. Christianity was already widespread by AD 112. 3. Roman officials viewed Christianity as a superstition, just as Tacitus and Suetonius did. 4. Christians followed moral teachings that matched Jesus' ethics. 5. They gathered regularly to share a communal meal, likely the Eucharist or love feast. 6. They met on a specific day, very likely Sunday. 7. Worship took place before dawn, probably to allow normal work days. 8. Christians could not be forced to worship Roman gods or the emperor. 9. Those who denied Christ and worshipped Rome were released. 10. True believers were executed. 11. The church already had recognized roles, including female deaconesses. 12. Christians were willing to suffer rather than deny Christ. Pliny unintentionally gives us a snapshot of early Christian worship, organized, moral, regular, and centered on Jesus as God. At this point, Pliny sounds more like a preacher than a prosecutor. The meal issue, important detail. Pliny emphasizes that the food Christians shared was ordinary, cibum promiscuum, harmless, innocent, innocentum. This matters because pagans accused Christians of ritual murder and cannibalism. Pliny makes clear, there was no sacrifice, no blood rituals, nothing criminal. This strongly suggests a misunderstanding of communion or the agape feast, not pagan worship. Conclusion. Pliny the Younger confirms, without intending to, that Christians worshiped Jesus as God. They lived by his teachings. They met regularly and openly. They suffered rather than deny him. And this was happening within living memory of the apostles. This is independent Roman testimony, not scripture, and it fits perfectly with everything we already know. Tacitus, the Roman historian, he's reporting a legal Roman execution. That's why he mentions Tiberius along with Pontius Pilate. Open quote. Consequently, to get rid of the report, Nero fastened the guilt and inflicted the most exquisite tortures on a class hated for their abominations, called Christians by the populace. Christus, from whom the name had its origin, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of our procurators, Pontius Pilatus, and a most mischievous superstition, thus checked for the moment, again broke out not only in Judea, the first source of the evil. Accordingly, an arrest was first made of all who pleaded guilty. Then, upon their information, an immense multitude was convicted, not so much of the crime of firing the city as of hatred against mankind. Mockery of every sort was added to their deaths. Covered with the skins of beasts, they were torn by dogs and perished, or were nailed to crosses, or were doomed to the flames and burnt, to serve as a nightly illumination when daylight had expired. Close quote. Bible evidence, Hebrews 11:36-37, open quote, 36. And others had trial of cruel mockings and scourgings, yea, moreover of bonds and imprisonment. 37. They were stoned, they were sawn asunder, were tempted, were slain with the sword. They wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, tormented. Close quote. This is what we learn. Had you read it and paid attention to what history says about the Christ, the anointed of Isaiah 61, the prophet of Deuteronomy, the miracle worker of the Psalms, the mighty God of Isaiah, etc., we learn this history. 1. Christians were named for their founder, Christus. 2. He was put to death by the Roman procurator Pontius Pilatus. 3. This occurred during the reign of Emperor Tiberius, AD 14 to 37. 4. His death ended the superstition for a short time. 5. But it broke out again. 6. Especially in Judea, where the teaching had its origin. 7. His followers carried his doctrine to Rome. 8. When the Great Fire destroyed a large part of the city during the reign of Nero, AD 54 to 68. 9. The emperor placed the blame on the Christians living in Rome. 10. Tacitus says they were hated for their abominations. 11. These Christians were arrested after pleading guilty. 12. Many were convicted for hatred for mankind. 13. They were mocked. 14. They were tortured, including being nailed to crosses or burned alive. 15. People had compassion on the Christians. Tacitus therefore concluded that such punishments were not for the public good, but simply to glut one man's cruelty. Suetonius, Roman historian and senator. Suetonius was a Roman historian, senator, and imperial official. He served as chief secretary to Emperor Hadrian, AD 117-138, and had direct access to imperial records. He was a friend and contemporary of Tacitus and does not contradict Tacitus at any point. Like many ancient historians, Suetonius was not alive for every event he recorded, and yet his work is considered unquestioned Roman history. That's how history works. The Bible is a myth, a bad argument. You may hear atheists say the Bible is not history, but myth. This argument falls apart immediately. The same Roman historians they trust for Roman history mention Jesus, Christ, mention Christians, mention Pontius Pilate, mention persecution, and confirm events described in Acts and Hebrews. You don't get to accept Roman history except where it overlaps with the Bible. Why Christianity spread so fast? Christianity didn't spread in a vacuum. Many Gentiles were already God-fearers, proselytes familiar with the Old Testament scriptures. They already knew a Messiah was coming. He would be called God. Isaiah 9 verse 6, he would bear the eternal name of God. Jeremiah 23, 5-6. He would be Jewish from the tribe of Judah. So when Christians preached Jesus as the Christ, the message already made sense. The real questions. Ask the right questions. Why do Roman historians call Jesus the Christ? Why do they say Christians worshipped him as God? Why do Roman records, our first non-Christian sources, confirm what the Bible already says? Why do the same historians who give us Roman history also tell us Christ was executed under Pontius Pilate? Suetonius on Christ and Christians. First reference, Claudius, 41-54. Suetonius writes, open quote, because the Jews at Rome caused continuous disturbances at the instigation of Christus, he expelled them from the city. Close quote. Christus is a known variant spelling of Christ, essentially the same form used by Tacitus. This refers to riots in Rome around AD 49, which led to Jews being expelled. This directly matches Acts 18 verse 2, where Paul meets Aquila and Priscilla, who had just left Rome because Claudius ordered all Jews to leave. That's Bible history confirmed by Roman history. Second reference, Nero, AD 54-68. Suetonius also writes about Nero, open quote, punishment was inflicted on the Christians, a class of men given to a new and mischievous superstition. Close quote. This matches Tacitus almost word for word. To Romans, superstitio meant an unauthorized religious movement, not recognized by the Roman state, seen as dangerous or fanatical. It does not mean false, it means unapproved. What we learn from Suetonius. From just two short references, we learn 1. Jews were expelled from Rome because of disputes connected to Christ. 2. Christ's teachings were already causing major unrest among Jewish communities. 3. Christians were known as a distinct group. 4. They were persecuted under Nero. 5. Romans viewed Christianity as a new and dangerous belief. This lines up exactly with Tacitus, Pliny, and the Book of Acts. About Pontius Pilate. Here's a challenge no skeptic can meet. Show one Roman historian who mentions Pontius Pilate in the 1st century. It doesn't exist. Why? Because most Roman histories do not survive from that period. Yet the same 2nd century Roman historians who give us trusted Roman history mention Pontius Pilate, mention Christ, and put them in the same sentence. You don't get Pilate without Christ.